The crisis of the 3rd century was a period in Roman history during which the Roman Empire nearly collapsed under the combined pressure of repeated foreign invasions, civil wars, and economic disintegration. At the peak of the crisis, the Roman Empire was split into 3 distinct and competing factions. There was the Italian-centered Roman Empire proper, another, the Gallic Empire, which encompassed the Roman provinces of Gaul, Britannia, and briefly Hispania, and lastly, the Palmyrene Empire, which encompassed the eastern provinces of Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. For years, Zenobia, the proud queen of Palmyra, had ruled the east from her desert stronghold. After Rome's chaos during the crisis of the 3rd century, she had expanded her dominion over Syria, Egypt, and much of Asia Minor, claiming to act in the name of Rome, but in truth, carving out her own empire. Now, Rome, after years of turmoil and treachery, had finally recovered under their new appointed emperor Aurelian, a hardened military veteran soldier determined to restore Rome back to its full strength and unity. Wasting no time, Aurelian marched his legions into the Middle Eastern region, swiftly securing victories over the Palmyrene army at the Battle of Imme near Antioch. Zenobia's general Zabdas had retreated southward with the remnants of the Palmyrene army. Aurelian, relentless, pursued them across the desert, his legions weary but faithful and disciplined. Zenobia's army gathered new strength at EMESA. Palmyrene legions trained in the Roman style of battle, coupled with Arab allies, Bedouin archers, and Palmyrene cataphracts, armored horsemen gleaming in their heavy armor. Their lances and scale armor reflected the power of the Eastern cavalry. All of these soldiers made up General Zabdas's ranks. Zenobia herself was present in EMESA, directing preparations and urging her general to resist. The queen, who had defied Rome and ruled from the Euphrates to the Nile, would not yet submit to Rome. Overall, Aurelian's forces were a mix of the Roman legions, Dalmatian and Thracian cavalry, and auxiliaries from across the empire. Though smaller than the Palmyrene host, reports suggesting about 40,000 Romans compared to the 50,000 in General Zabdas's command. What the Romans lacked in numbers, however, was made up in discipline, experience, and the emperor himself commanding the army within the ranks. The Palmyrenes arranged their lines similar to the Romans, with cavalry on the wings and infantry in the center. Their cataphracts formed the striking arm of Zabdas's army. The Romans formed tight infantry blocks, their cavalry positioned to counter their heavy horsemen foes. Aurelian, a skillful battle commander, knew his cavalry was inferior. His plan was to draw them away from the battle and use his superior infantry to their advantage. He opened the battle by sending forth his cavalry to lure out Zabda's cavalry. Like clockwork, Aurelian had predicted that Zabdas would fall for the bait. His superior eastern cataphracts gave pursuit, their ferocity and momentum quickly gaining on the retreating Roman cavalry. Aurelian knew there was no time to waste. He sent his infantry at the center forward to give battle. They pressed onward in a forced march. Zabdas's eastern archers stepped forward from behind the safety of their infantry, drew their strong composite bows, and loosed a terrifying rainfall of arrows down upon the oncoming Romans. Those unlucky enough to be at the front were hit with a relentless and continuous barrage of sharp projectiles. The Roman infantry in disciplined ranks smashed into the Palmyrene center, their momentum pushing back the front lines of Zabdas's troops. Aurelian's troops, like a well-structured unit, pushed forward, cutting their way into the lines of the inferior Palmyrene legions. The Roman legions with superior fighting prowess gained the advantage in the hand-to-hand fighting. Aurelian had attempted to repeat the ruse he conducted in his victory at EMESA to order his cavalry to pretend to flee. Whatsoever, the Palmyrene heavy cavalry attacked furiously, catching the Roman cavalry and tying them down. To make matters even worse for Aurelian, his cavalry were fewer in number, and lighter in arms and armor in comparison to their Palmyrene foes. They were not equipped to fight them in a head-on engagement, and as such were beginning to falter and lose decisively. To make matters worse for Aurelian, Zabdas had Syrian-mounted archers in his ranks that were raining death onto the Roman cavalry, further demoralizing their seamlessly impossible situation. At the center, Aurelian commanded his legions to push their advantage. Zabdas, attempting to slow their advance, ordered his reserve infantry to reinforce his front lines. The numerical advantage of the Palmyrene infantry slowed the Roman advance, bringing the fighting to a standstill, favoring the Romans' skill and prowess in close-quarter fighting. In the midst of the fighting, Aurelian was made aware of the situation at his rear. He knew that he could not afford to allow his cavalry to be routed, or worse, killed, as that would open up his flanks and rear. Without the protection of his cavalry, his force would be enveloped and destroyed. With little time to think, Aurelian acted rapidly. He sent some of his rear auxiliaries and light troops, primarily from the Palestinian region, to sprint as quickly as possible to the aid of his struggling cavalry. Time was of the essence. They ran as quickly as their legs would carry them toward the cavalry engagement. If they could not make it before the Roman cavalry was routed or killed, then the Palmyrene heavy cavalry could have effortlessly turned their attention towards the Roman light troops. And now exposed and out on the open battlefield, they would have been rowed down and killed in mere seconds. When it came to Aurelian, however, timing always seemed to work in his favor. His light auxiliaries arrived just in the nick of time. They closed the distance, loosed their javelins into the rears of the Palmyrene cavalry, sowing shock amongst their ranks, and then without any hesitation swarmed them from behind, enveloping their position. They used sharp weapons as well as blunted clubs to attack the horses' legs, dismounting their riders and sending the horses into a panicked frenzy. The heavy Eastern cavalry, utterly stunned at such a bold maneuver, as well as being caught completely off guard, was enough to send many of the Palmyrene riders retreating from the engagement. Aurelian's last-ditch effort to save the battle had turned into a winning lottery ticket. The main Palmyrene force at the center was now holding firm and gaining back ground. However, with the sight of their elite cavalry being routed from battle, the infantry simply surrendered. Many dropped their weapons, turned their backs and ran off, not wanting to die for what they believed was now a lost cause. The defeat at the Battle of EMESA forced what was left of the Palmyrene armies to retreat to the capital of their empire, the city of Palmyra, where Zenobia and her son sought to gather forces to resist Aurelian's legions. Unlike Zenobia's coordinated and orderly withdrawal from Antioch, her withdrawal was tremendously hastened, forcing her to leave the imperial treasury behind at the city. The Romans began to besiege Palmyra and tried to breach the city's defenses several times. But the Roman attacks were repelled by the city's defenders. However, as the siege dragged on, the situation inside the capital, Palmyra, worsened. So Zenobia left the city and fled eastwards in the direction of Persia to ask the Sasanian Empire for support and much-needed aid in the war against the Roman Empire. However, she was captured by Roman soldiers soon after she reached the eastern bank of the Euphrates River. After capturing her, the Roman soldiers took her to their emperor. Soon after hearing that their empress had been captured, the citizens of Palmyra asked the emperor for peace, and the city fell to the Romans. The proud queen, who had dreamed of ruling a new empire between Rome and Persia, was brought in golden chains before Aurelian. She would be eventually taken back to Rome, where she was given her own estate to live out her life peacefully. Her general Zabdas, however, was not so fortunate. He was executed. Palmyra was spared for the moment, but when it rebelled again the following year, Aurelian returned and destroyed it utterly. The Battle of EMESA marked the end of organized Palmyrene resistance, and it restored Roman dominance in the east. Aurelian had reforged the empire through steel and discipline, earning the title Restitutor Orbis, Restorer of the World.